The heavy oak doors of Westminster Palace groaned open, echoing through the vast throne room like a death knell. Lady Isabella Whitmore held her chin high, despite the iron shackles that bound her wrists, her emerald silk gown torn and muddied from 3 days of imprisonment in the Tower's dungeon. The morning light streaming through the tall windows caught the defiant fire in her green eyes as she was forced to walk the long path toward the throne. King Alexander Blackthorne sat motionless on the dragon throne, carved from black oak and inlaid with gold. At 32, he was a formidable figure, broad shoulders draped in royal blue velvet, dark hair swept back from a face that had grown harder with each year of his reign. The scar running from his left temple to his jaw, earned in the Battle of Thornfield, only added to his intimidating presence. "Your Majesty," the guard announced, his voice trembling slightly. "Lady Isabella Whitmore, daughter of the traitor Lord Edmund Whitmore." Isabella's jaw clenched at the word traitor, but she remained silent. Around the throne room, dozens of courtiers watched with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Whispers had spread quickly through the palace about the failed rebellion led by Lord Whitmore, one of the king's former trusted advisers who had dared to challenge Alexander's increasingly harsh taxes on the northern counties. The king rose slowly, descending the 3 steps from his throne with deliberate precision. Each footstep seemed to thunder in the sudden silence. When he stopped before Isabella, she was forced to crane her neck to meet his piercing grey eyes, eyes that had seen too much blood, too much betrayal. "Lady Isabella Whitmore." His voice was deep, controlled, but there was something dangerous lurking beneath the surface. "Daughter of a man who broke bread at my table, who swore fealty to my crown and who repaid my trust with steel and sedition." Isabella's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "My father is a good man who sought to protect his people from starvation, Your Majesty. The taxes—" Silence. The word cracked like a whip across the throne room. Alexander stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the subtle scent of sandalwood, and something uniquely male that made her pulse quicken despite her fear. "Your father raised arms against his rightful king. The penalty for treason is death. You know this." Isabella's breath caught. She had prepared herself for this moment during the endless hours in her cell, but hearing it spoken aloud made her knees weak. Still, she would not beg. The Whitmore name meant something, even now. "Then why am I here, Your Majesty? Why not simply execute me alongside the other conspirators?" A cruel smile played at the corners of Alexander's mouth, though his eyes remained cold. "Because your death would be too swift, too merciful. Your father valued you above all else, his precious daughter, his pride and joy. So you, Lady Isabella, will live, but not as you have known life." He began to circle her slowly, like a predator studying its prey. "You will remain here at court as a ward of the crown. You will serve as a reminder to all who would dare raise a hand against me. Every day you draw breath will be a testament to the price of rebellion." Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. A life in captivity, stripped of her title, her lands, her freedom. It was a fate worse than death for someone born to nobility. "You cannot," she began, but Alexander raised a hand, silencing her. "I am the king, Lady Isabella. I can do whatever I please." His eyes met hers, and for a moment something flickered in their grey depths, something that might have been regret, or perhaps curiosity, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. As if awakening from a trance, Alexander stepped back and turned to his guards. "Take her to the East Wing. She will be given chambers befitting her new status. See that she is provided with appropriate clothing and meals. She is, after all, still a lady, albeit one who has forgotten her place." As the guards moved to escort her away, Isabella found her voice one last time. "Your Majesty," she called out, causing him to pause but not turn around. "My father's rebellion may have failed, but his cause was just. The people suffer while the crown grows fat. That truth will not die with me in your gilded cage." Alexander's shoulders tensed, and when he finally turned back to her, his expression was unreadable. For a long moment, their eyes locked across the throne room, green fire meeting grey ice. "We shall see, Lady Isabella," he said quietly, his words carrying a promise that neither of them fully understood. "We shall see." 3 weeks had passed since Isabella's arrival at court, and she had quickly learned that her imprisonment was far more complex than simple captivity. The chambers she'd been given in the East Wing were indeed fitting for a lady. Spacious rooms decorated with fine tapestries, a comfortable bed with silk curtains, and windows that overlooked the palace gardens. But the windows were barred, and guards were always stationed outside her door. The routine had become numbingly predictable. Each morning, a servant girl named Mary would bring breakfast and help her dress in the simple but well-made gowns that had been provided. Browns and greys, nothing too fine, a constant reminder of her fallen status. Then Isabella would be escorted to the great hall for the midday meal, where she sat at a table far from the nobility, but visible to all, a living symbol of the king's justice. This particular morning, however, brought an unexpected change. Instead of Mary, a stern-faced woman in her 50s entered the chamber. Isabella recognized her immediately, Lady Catherine Ashford, the Queen's former lady-in-waiting, and now one of the most influential women at court. "Lady Isabella," Catherine said briskly, her grey hair pulled back in a severe bun, "His Majesty has requested your presence in the Royal Library this afternoon. You are to assist with cataloguing the new manuscripts that arrived from France." Isabella looked up from her embroidery, surprised. In the weeks since her arrival, the king had not spoken to her once, though she often felt his eyes upon her during meals. I'm to work in the library?" "Indeed. The king feels that idleness breeds dangerous thoughts. You will be kept occupied." Catherine's tone suggested she disapproved of this arrangement, but would not dare question the king's orders. "You will be escorted there after the noon meal." As Catherine turned to leave, Isabella couldn't help but ask, "Lady Catherine, why? Why would the king trust me with such a task?" The older woman paused at the door, considering her words carefully. "His Majesty is complex, child. Perhaps he believes that a woman of your education should not waste away entirely. Or perhaps," she added with a meaningful look, "he has other reasons entirely." The hours until noon dragged by with agonizing slowness. Isabella found herself changing her gown twice, settling finally on a deep blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes, then immediately chastising herself for caring about her appearance. She was a prisoner, not a courtier seeking to impress the king. The Royal Library was a marvel she had only heard described in whispers. Tall shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with more books than she had ever seen in one place. The smell of parchment and leather bindings filled the air, and afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows, creating a warm, golden atmosphere that felt almost sacred. King Alexander was already there when she arrived, standing behind a massive oak desk covered with manuscripts. He had removed his formal court attire and wore only a simple white shirt and dark breeches, making him seem somehow more human, more approachable. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he bent over a particularly ornate volume. "Your Majesty," Isabella said, offering a curtsy that was respectful but not servile. He looked up, and she was struck again by the intelligence in his grey eyes. "Lady Isabella, I trust your accommodations continue to be adequate." "They are more than adequate, Your Majesty." "Thank you." She gestured toward the manuscripts. "Lady Catherine said you required assistance with cataloguing?" Alexander studied her for a long moment, and Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks under his scrutiny. "Tell me, what languages do you read?" "English and French fluently, Your Majesty. Some Latin, though I'm not as accomplished as I would like." "And your education in history, philosophy?" Isabella couldn't hide her surprise. "My father ensured I received the same education as my brothers, Your Majesty. I have studied the classical texts, the works of Thomas Aquinas, some of the newer Italian philosophers." "Interesting." Alexander moved around the desk, and Isabella noticed he walked with a slight limp, another souvenir from his years of warfare. "Your father, for all his treasonous failings, was not a fool. He knew the value of an educated mind." The comment about her father stung, but Isabella forced herself to remain calm. "My father believed that knowledge was the greatest gift he could give his children, and yet that knowledge led him to rebellion." Alexander's voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. "Tell me, Lady Isabella, what do you know of the history of taxation in England, of the delicate balance between the Crown's needs and the people's welfare?" Isabella hesitated, sensing a trap. "I know that my father believed the recent tax increases were causing genuine hardship in the northern counties. Families were starving, Your Majesty. Children were dying. And did your father consider that without adequate funds, I cannot maintain the army necessary to protect those same families from Scottish raiders? That I cannot repair the roads they need for commerce, or maintain the courts that ensure justice?" Alexander's eyes flashed with something that might have been frustration. Did he think to approach his king with his concerns before raising his banners in rebellion? He tried, Your Majesty. The words escaped before Isabella could stop them. He sent 3 separate petitions to court. They were ignored. Silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken accusations and defenses. Alexander moved to the window, staring out at the gardens where courtiers strolled in the afternoon sun. "Your father was once my friend," he said finally, his voice so quiet Isabella had to strain to hear it. "He taught me to hunt, to fight with honor, rather than simple brutality. When I took the throne after my father's death, Edmund Whitmore was one of the few men I trusted completely." Isabella felt her throat tighten. She had never heard this side of the story. "But trust," Alexander continued, turning back to face her, "is a luxury kings can rarely afford. Your father forgot that lesson. And now," he gestured toward her, his meaning clear, "now his daughter pays the price for his choices," Isabella finished softly. "Yes." Alexander's eyes met hers, and something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps, or shared grief for the friendship that had been destroyed. But perhaps some prices can be negotiated. Before Isabella could ask what he meant, the king had returned to his manuscripts, effectively dismissing her questions. But as she began working with the French texts he had indicated, she was acutely aware of his presence, of the way he occasionally glanced at her when he thought she wasn't looking, and of the strange flutter in her chest whenever their eyes accidentally met. The gilded cage, she realized, was becoming more complex by the day. The library sessions became a daily ritual over the following weeks. Each afternoon, Isabella would find herself working alongside the king in the golden silence of the great room, cataloguing manuscripts, translating French texts, and occasionally engaging in careful conversations about history and philosophy. She began to see glimpses of the man beneath the crown, intelligent, well-read, and carrying burdens that seemed to weigh heavily on his broad shoulders. On this particular afternoon, a violent thunderstorm raged outside, rain lashing against the tall windows and turning the library into an intimate cocoon of warmth and candlelight. Isabella was bent over a manuscript about agricultural practices in Normandy when she became aware that Alexander had stopped working and was watching her. "You have a small scar," he observed quietly, "just above your left eyebrow." Isabella's hand flew instinctively to the barely visible mark. "I fell from an apple tree when I was 7. My brother Thomas dared me to climb higher than was wise." "And did you?" Despite herself, Isabella smiled. "Of course, a Whitmore never backs down from a challenge, even when wisdom would suggest retreat." Alexander's voice carried a note of something that might have been amusement, but his eyes remained serious. "Perhaps that is the Whitmore failing, Your Majesty. We have never been particularly wise when it comes to knowing when to yield." Alexander rose from his chair and moved to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. "Your father certainly proved that point. But then again, neither have I been accused of excessive wisdom in recent years." Isabella set down her quill, studying his profile in the candlelight. "Your Majesty, may I speak freely? In this room, you may say whatever is on your mind, Lady Isabella. I give you my word that nothing you say here will be used against you." Isabella took a deep breath, knowing she was about to step onto dangerous ground. "The courtiers whisper that you have grown harder since the Queen's death, that grief has made you suspicious of everyone, even old friends." Alexander's jaw tightened, but he didn't turn from the window. "The courtiers whisper about many things. Most of it is meaningless chatter, but not all of it." He was quiet for so long that Isabella thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Margaret died giving birth to my son. The child lived only 3 days." He paused, and Isabella saw his hands clench into fists at his sides. "I was campaigning in the north when it happened, dealing with raids from Scotland, securing our borders while my wife died alone." Isabella felt her heart constrict. She had heard rumors about the tragedy, but hearing it from Alexander's own lips made it devastatingly real. "Oh, Your Majesty, I don't." He turned to face her, and she was shocked to see raw pain in his grey eyes. "Don't offer me sympathy. I've had 3 years of sympathy, of careful words and cautious glances. It changes nothing." Isabella rose from her chair, moving closer despite every instinct telling her to maintain distance. "No, it doesn't change anything. But carrying that guilt alone will destroy you." Alexander's laugh was bitter. "Destroy me? Lady Isabella, I am already destroyed. I am a king who failed to protect what mattered most." a husband who chose duty over love, a father who never even held his son while he lived. You are a man, Isabella said firmly, who made impossible choices in an impossible situation. You cannot protect everyone, even kings are not gods. Their eyes met across the space between them, and Isabella realized she had moved close enough to see the flecks of silver in his grey irises, close enough to smell the scent of rain and sandalwood that seemed to cling to his skin. Why? Alexander asked suddenly. Why do you offer me understanding when I have taken everything from you? Isabella considered the question, surprised by her own answer. Because I see the man my father once called friend. Because despite everything that has happened, I believe that man still exists. Alexander reached out slowly, as if drawn by invisible threads, and traced the small scar above her eyebrow with one finger. His touch was gentle, reverent, and Isabella felt her breath catch in her throat. You are dangerous, Lady Isabella Whitmore, he murmured. More dangerous than any rebellion your father could have mounted. Your Majesty, Isabella began, but she was interrupted by the sound of the library doors opening. Alexander stepped back quickly, his expression immediately returning to its usual mask of royal composure. Lord Chancellor William Harrison entered, his thin frame draped in black robes, his sharp features pinched with disapproval as he took in the intimate scene. Your Majesty, Harrison said with a bow that managed to convey both respect and censure. I apologize for the interruption, but the Scottish ambassadors have arrived early. They await your presence in the Great Hall. Of course they have, Alexander muttered. Then louder, Thank you, William. I will join them shortly. Harrison's cold gaze flicked to Isabella. And what of the prisoner, Your Majesty? Alexander's expression hardened at the word prisoner, though Isabella couldn't tell if his anger was directed at Harrison or at the reminder of her status. Lady Isabella will return to her chambers. As Harrison withdrew, Alexander gathered his papers with sharp, efficient movements. The moment of intimacy was gone, as if it had never existed, leaving Isabella feeling strangely bereft. Your Majesty, she said as he prepared to leave, what happened here? Nothing happened here, Alexander said firmly, but his eyes betrayed him. We discussed manuscripts and history, nothing more. He strode toward the door, then paused without turning around. Lady Isabella, be careful. The court has many eyes, and not all of them are friendly. What some might interpret as favoritism could be dangerous for you. Isabella watched him go, her heart pounding. She understood the warning beneath his words, but she also understood something else. King Alexander Blackthorne was beginning to care for her, and that terrified him far more than any rebellion ever could. The morning brought unwelcome visitors to Isabella's chambers. She woke to find Lady Catherine standing at her window, her usual stern expression replaced by something that looked almost like concern. Get dressed quickly, Catherine said without preamble. The brown wool, nothing decorative. Lord Harrison wishes to speak with you. Isabella's blood chilled. Lord Harrison was known throughout the court as the king's most ruthless advisor, a man who had orchestrated the executions of countless nobles deemed threats to the crown. His interest in her could mean nothing good. What does he want? Isabella asked as she quickly dressed with Catherine's help. I don't know, and I wouldn't tell you if I did, Catherine replied, but her voice was gentler than usual. Whatever he asks you, child, remember that your words will be weighed carefully. Lord Harrison has the king's ear, and he has never approved of your current situation. Within the hour, Isabella found herself in Harrison's private study, a cramped room filled with ledgers and documents that smelled of ink and suspicion. The Lord Chancellor sat behind his desk like a spider in its web, his pale eyes studying her with unconcealed disdain. Lady Isabella, he began without offering her a seat, or perhaps I should simply call you Isabella, as your title exists now only by the king's mercy. Isabella raised her chin. You may call me whatever pleases you, my lord. My circumstances do not change who I am. Harrison's thin lips curved in what might charitably be called a smile. Ah yes, the famous Whitmore pride. It runs in the family, doesn't it? Your father's pride cost him his head. I wonder what yours will cost you. If you have something to say to me, my lord, I wish you would say it plainly. Harrison rose from his chair and moved to a cabinet, withdrawing a leather portfolio. Very well. I have reports, Isabella, from servants, guards, even some courtiers, reports about your daily sessions with His Majesty in the library. Isabella felt her heart begin to race, but she kept her expression calm. The king requires assistance with his manuscripts. I provide that assistance. Indeed. And during these assistance sessions, what do you and His Majesty discuss? History, philosophy, the translation of various texts. Isabella met his gaze steadily. Nothing that would be of interest to the Lord Chancellor, I assure you. Harrison opened the portfolio and withdrew a piece of parchment. According to this report from one of the library servants, yesterday afternoon, you and the king were observed standing very close together, close enough that His Majesty was seen touching your face. The blood drained from Isabella's face, but she forced herself to remain standing straight. If such a thing occurred, it was merely the king examining a small scar. Nothing more. Nothing more. Harrison repeated the words with obvious disbelief. Tell me, Isabella, what do you think happens to women who attempt to seduce the king? Who use their feminine wiles to gain influence over the crown? Isabella's temper flared. I have done no such thing. I am a prisoner here, not some scheming courtier seeking advancement. Are you? Harrison moved closer, and Isabella could see the calculation in his cold eyes, because from where I stand, it appears that the king has developed an attachment to the daughter of a traitor, an attachment that could prove dangerous to the stability of the realm. The king feels nothing for me save perhaps pity, Isabella said, though the words tasted like lies. I am a reminder of his justice, nothing more. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. You know, Isabella, I almost believe you mean that, which makes you either a very good liar or dangerously naive. He returned to his desk and sat down. Let me explain something to you about kings and the women who catch their attention. His Majesty has been without a wife for 3 years. He is a man in his prime with a man's needs and desires. The court watches him carefully, waiting for signs of who might become the next queen. Isabella felt sick. I could never what? Never hope that royal favor might lead to something more? Never dream that the king might elevate you from prisoner to consort? Harrison's voice grew sharper. I've seen it before, girl. Women who believe that capturing a king's attention makes them special, powerful. They rarely end well. What do you want from me? Isabella asked quietly. Harrison smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. I want you to remember your place. You are the daughter of a traitor, kept alive as an example. The king's current interest in you is a passing fancy, nothing more. But if you attempt to use that interest for your own advancement, if you seek to manipulate His Majesty's emotions for political gain, I will see you destroyed. Isabella lifted her chin defiantly. Is that a threat, my lord? It is a promise. Harrison's voice was silk over steel. The king may protect you now, but protection can be withdrawn. Accidents happen at court. Prisoners sometimes simply disappear. Do we understand each other? Isabella understood perfectly. She was being warned off, threatened into compliance. The realization that Harrison saw her as a genuine threat to his own influence was both terrifying and oddly gratifying. We understand each other completely, Lord Harrison, she said with as much dignity as she could muster. Excellent. You may go. Isabella turned toward the door, then paused. My lord, may I ask you something? Harrison waved his hand impatiently. What are you so afraid of? Isabella asked. If I am truly just the daughter of a traitor, if my influence is nothing more than a passing fancy, why does my presence at court concern you so greatly? For a moment Harrison's mask slipped, and Isabella saw something that looked almost like fear in his pale eyes. Because, you foolish girl, I have served this crown for 20 years. I have watched kings make terrible decisions in the name of love, watched them destroy kingdoms for the sake of a woman's smile. His Majesty is strong, but even strong men can be weakened by the right pair of green eyes. Isabella felt her breath catch. You think he... I think, Harrison said coldly, that you should pray he doesn't, for both your sakes. As Isabella left his study and walked back to her chambers, Harrison's words echoed in her mind. The Lord Chancellor was afraid that whatever was growing between her and Alexander might threaten his own position, his own power. But more than that, he was afraid it might be real. And if Isabella was honest with herself, that possibility terrified her too. The days following her meeting with Lord Harrison passed in tense uncertainty. Isabella found herself looking over her shoulder constantly, aware that every servant, every guard, every courtier might be watching her for signs of the forbidden attachment Harrison suspected. The library sessions continued, but now they carried an undercurrent of danger that made every shared glance feel like a transgression. Alexander seemed to sense the change in her demeanor. On a grey October afternoon, as they worked in companionable silence, he finally addressed the elephant in the room. "You've been different these past few days," he observed, not looking up from the illuminated manuscript he was examining. "Distant. Have I done something to offend you?" Isabella set down her quill, considering her words carefully. "Your Majesty, there are those at court who believe our working arrangement is inappropriate." Alexander's head snapped up, his grey eyes suddenly sharp and dangerous. "Who has spoken to you? It doesn't matter who. It matters to me." Alexander rose from his chair, moving around the desk to stand before her. "Isabella, if someone has threatened you, I need to know." The use of her given name, spoken with such concern, made her heart flutter dangerously. "Please, Your Majesty, I don't wish to cause trouble." Alexander studied her face for a long moment, then moved to the library doors. Isabella heard the distinctive sound of a heavy bar being lowered. He was locking them in. When he returned, his expression was grim. "Now we can speak freely without fear of listening ears," he said. "Tell me what happened." Isabella found herself recounting her meeting with Lord Harrison, watching Alexander's expression grow darker with each detail. By the time she finished, his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "That poisonous snake," Alexander muttered. "I should have known Harrison would see you as a threat to his influence." "But Your Majesty, perhaps he's right. Perhaps our meetings are inappropriate. I am still your prisoner and you are the king. People will talk, and that talk could be dangerous for both of us." Alexander moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames. "Do you know why I really brought you to work in the library, Isabella?" She shook her head, though he couldn't see the gesture. "Because in 3 years of widowhood, you are the first person who has spoken to me as Alexander rather than the king. You argue with me, challenge my thoughts, treat me as a man rather than a crown." He turned back to her, and the vulnerability in his eyes took her breath away. "For a few hours each day in this room, I remember who I used to be before grief and responsibility consumed everything else." Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. "Your Majesty, Alexander," he said firmly. "In this room, when we are alone, I am simply Alexander." "Alexander," she repeated softly, and the name felt dangerously intimate on her lips. What Harrison said about kings making terrible decisions for love, he's not entirely wrong. History is full of such stories. Alexander moved closer, close enough that she could see the pain and longing warring in his expression. "And what if he's right? What if what I feel for you is more than a king should feel for his prisoner?" Isabella's breath caught. "What do you feel for me?" "I dream of your eyes," he admitted quietly. "Green as spring leaves, fierce as storm clouds. I dream of your voice, your laughter, the way you bite your lower lip when you're concentrating on a difficult translation." He reached out, almost touching her face before dropping his hand. "I dream of things that could never be." Isabella's heart was pounding so hard, she was certain he could hear it. "Alexander, we cannot—" "I know," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know exactly how impossible this is. You are the daughter of a man I had executed for treason. I am a king who must marry for political alliance, not for personal desire. But knowing something is impossible doesn't make it any less real." Isabella felt tears spill down her cheeks. "This is madness." "Yes," Alexander agreed, and suddenly he was cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "Complete madness." For a moment, they stood frozen, the air between them crackling with tension and possibility. Isabella could feel the warmth of his palms against her skin, could see the desire and conflict battling in his eyes. She knew that if he kissed her now, she would be lost completely. The moment was shattered by a sharp knock on the library doors. Alexander stepped back quickly, running his hands through his dark hair. "Yes?" he called out, his voice admirably steady. "Your Majesty," came a guard's voice. "The French ambassador has arrived unexpectedly. Lord Harrison requests your immediate presence in the throne room." Alexander closed his eyes briefly, composing himself. "Tell Lord Harrison I will be there shortly." As the guard's footsteps retreated, Alexander turned back to Isabella. "We cannot speak of this again for both our sakes." Isabella nodded, though her heart was breaking. "I understand." Alexander moved toward the door, then paused. "Isabella, whatever happens, whatever Harrison or anyone else may threaten, know that I will not let harm come to you. You have my word as king and as a man." After he left, Isabella remained in the library for a long time, touching her cheek where his hands had been, and trying to reconcile the impossible truth. She was falling in love with the man who had destroyed her family, and worse, he was falling in love with her too. The French ambassador's unexpected arrival brought disturbing news that sent ripples of tension throughout the court. Isabella learned of it, as she learned most court gossip, from Mary, the young servant who had become her closest confidant during her months of captivity. "They say King Louis is offering a marriage alliance," Mary whispered as she helped Isabella dress for the evening meal. "His youngest daughter, Princess Marguerite. She's barely 18, they say, and beautiful as a spring morning." Isabella's hands stilled on the laces of her bodice. "A marriage alliance?" "Aye, my lady. The whole court's buzzing about it. Lord Harrison is said to be very pleased. Apparently he's been pushing His Majesty to remarry for months now." Mary's eyes were bright with excitement at being the bearer of such significant news. "They say the French are offering a dowry that would fund the royal army for 2 years, plus trading rights that would make England rich as Midas." Isabella forced herself to continue dressing, though her fingers felt numb. "I see. And what does His Majesty think of this generous offer?" "Well, that's the strange thing," Mary said, lowering her voice even further. "Usually the king would receive such ambassadors in the Great Hall with all the pomp and ceremony, but this time he's meeting them privately in his chambers. Some are saying he's eager to discuss the terms quickly. Others—" She trailed off, looking uncertain. "Others what, Mary?" "Others say he looked like a man heading to his own execution." That evening the Great Hall was electric with speculation. Isabella took her usual place at the lower table, acutely aware of the whispered conversations swirling around her. At the high table, Alexander sat in his ornate chair, the French ambassador to his right. Even from a distance, Isabella could see the tension in the king's shoulders, the way his jaw was set in a hard line. Lord Harrison, seated to the king's left, appeared to be in excellent spirits, engaging the French delegation in animated conversation. Princess Marguerite's portrait had been displayed prominently near the head table, a lovely young woman with golden hair and innocent blue eyes, everything a king could want in a wife. Isabella found she had no appetite for the roasted pheasant and honey cakes that were served. Every time she looked toward the high table, she found Alexander's eyes on her, dark with an emotion she couldn't quite read. The looks they exchanged were brief but intense, weighted with everything they couldn't say. The evening's entertainment featured a troupe of French musicians, their romantic ballads about courtly love striking Isabella as particularly cruel given the circumstances. As they sang of knights and ladies, of love that conquered all obstacles, she felt Alexander's gaze like a physical touch. "Lady Isabella." She looked up to find Sir Marcus Thornfield, one of the younger knights, standing beside her table. Marcus was handsome in a conventional way, with brown hair and kind eyes, and he had always been respectful during her time at court. "Sir Marcus," she replied, offering a polite smile, "would you do me the honor of walking with me in the garden? The evening is pleasant, and I thought you might enjoy some fresh air." Isabella glanced toward the high table and saw Alexander watching the exchange with unmistakable displeasure. Something defiant sparked in her chest. If the king was going to marry a French princess, if their impossible relationship was truly over before it had begun, then perhaps she should start considering her own options. "That would be lovely, Sir Marcus," she said, rising from her seat. The gardens were indeed beautiful in the moonlight, filled with the scent of late-blooming roses and the gentle sound of fountains. Marcus was an easy companion, speaking of his family's lands in the south, asking about her interests, treating her with a respect she hadn't experienced from many at court. "Lady Isabella," he said as they paused beside a marble fountain carved with images of dancing nymphs, "I hope you don't mind my boldness, but I wanted you to know that not everyone at court sees you merely as a prisoner or a political statement." Isabella looked at him with genuine surprise. "What do you mean?" Marcus smiled, and in the moonlight he looked quite handsome. "I mean that some of us see you as a remarkable woman who has maintained her dignity and grace under impossible circumstances. Your intelligence, your strength, these are qualities any man would admire." "Sir Marcus, I'm flattered, but I'm not asking for anything, my lady," he said gently. "I simply wanted you to know that when you're ready, when the time is right, there are those who would consider themselves honored by your regard." Before Isabella could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Alexander emerged from the shadows, his expression thunderous. "Sir Marcus," he said, his voice deadly quiet. I believe you are needed in the Great Hall. The French delegation was asking about our cavalry training methods. Marcus bowed respectfully, though Isabella noticed his jaw clench slightly. Of course, Your Majesty. Lady Isabella, thank you for the pleasant walk. As Marcus retreated, Alexander turned to Isabella with barely controlled fury. What exactly do you think you're doing? Isabella lifted her chin defiantly. I was enjoying a conversation with a gentleman who treats me with respect. Is that now forbidden, Your Majesty? Don't play games with me, Isabella. You know perfectly well why. Alexander stopped himself, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Sir Marcus is a good man, but he's also young and romantic. Encouraging his attentions would be cruel to him and dangerous for you. Dangerous how? You've made it quite clear that whatever exists between us is impossible. Perhaps it's time I started considering other possibilities. Alexander's eyes flashed with something that looked like jealousy. Other possibilities? Sir Marcus is unmarried, titled, and wealthy enough to offer a comfortable life. Perhaps if he were to ask for my hand, you might consider releasing me from my current circumstances. Alexander stared at her for a long moment, and Isabella could see the war raging in his expression. Finally he spoke, his voice carefully controlled. Is that what you want? To marry Sir Marcus Thornfield? Isabella hesitated, her heart screaming the truth she couldn't speak aloud. I want to be free, she said instead. I want to be more than a symbol of your justice. Alexander nodded slowly, as if her words had confirmed something he'd already known. Very well. If Sir Marcus makes a formal request for your hand, I will consider it favorably. Isabella felt her heart break a little more. And the French princess? What about her? Will you marry her? Alexander's expression was unreadable. It would be an advantageous match for England. That's not what I asked. Alexander stepped closer, close enough that she could see the pain in his eyes. What I do or don't do is no longer your concern, Lady Isabella. You've made your position clear. He turned to walk away, then paused. For what it's worth, he said without looking back, I hope Sir Marcus makes you happy. You deserve happiness. As Alexander disappeared back into the palace, Isabella sank onto the edge of the fountain, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. She had thought she was protecting herself by pushing him away, but instead she had only succeeded in breaking both their hearts. The game of courts and crowns was more cruel than she had ever imagined. 3 days after the garden encounter, Isabella woke to find her world turned completely upside down. Mary burst into her chambers before dawn, her face flushed with excitement and worry. My lady, you must get dressed immediately, Mary said, rushing to the wardrobe. The king has summoned you to his private study, and, my lady, Sir Marcus has formally requested an audience with His Majesty this morning. Isabella's heart lurched. He's asking for my hand. So the rumors say. The whole castle is talking about it. Lord Harrison is said to be furious. Apparently he believes Sir Marcus is being used as a pawn to distract from more important matters. Mary pulled out Isabella's finest remaining gown, a deep emerald silk that brought out her eyes. But, my lady, there's something else. Something strange. What do you mean? Mary lowered her voice to barely above a whisper. The French ambassador left in the middle of the night. No ceremony, no formal farewell, just gone, and the portrait of Princess Marguerite has been removed from the Great Hall. Isabella felt a flutter of something that might have been hope, but she quickly suppressed it. Whatever had transpired with the French delegation, it didn't change the fundamental impossibility of her situation. The king's private study was smaller and more intimate than the library, filled with maps, personal correspondence, and books that showed signs of frequent use. Alexander stood with his back to the door when she entered, staring out the window at the grey October morning. Your Majesty, Isabella said, offering a curtsy. Close the door, he said without turning around, and lock it. Isabella hesitated, then did as he asked. The sound of the lock engaging seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Sir Marcus has requested permission to court you formally, Alexander said, still not facing her. He's prepared to offer a substantial bride price and has assured me that he would treat you with all the honor due a lady of noble birth. I see, Isabella managed, though her throat felt tight. He's a good man, young, perhaps, and somewhat idealistic, but honorable. He would be kind to you. Alexander's voice was carefully neutral, but Isabella could hear the tension underneath. His estates are prosperous, and his family has always been loyal to the crown. You could have a good life with him. And what did you tell him? Alexander finally turned to face her, and Isabella was shocked by what she saw. His face was haggard, as if he hadn't slept in days, and there was something desperate in his grey eyes. I told him I would give him my answer today. Alexander moved closer, and Isabella could see the internal battle raging within him. But before I do, I need to know something. When you walked with him in the garden, when you spoke of freedom and other possibilities, did you mean it? Isabella searched his face, trying to understand what he was really asking. Your Majesty, Not your Majesty. Not in here. Not now. Alexander's voice was raw. I sent the French ambassador away, Isabella. I rejected their marriage proposal, their gold, their political alliance. Lord Harrison is furious, the council is questioning my judgment, and half the court thinks I've lost my mind. Isabella's breath caught. Why? Because I realize that no amount of political advantage is worth marrying someone I don't love, when the woman I do love is standing right in front of me. Alexander reached out and cupped her face in his hands, just as he had in the library. Because I'm tired of being a king first and a man second. Because these past months with you have been the only time I've felt truly alive since Margaret died. Tears spilled down Isabella's cheeks. Alexander, we can't what? Can't love each other. Because it's too late for that, Isabella, far too late. His thumbs wiped away her tears with infinite gentleness. Can't be together, perhaps. But before I give you to another man, before I condemn us both to lives of duty and resignation, I need to know, do you love me? Isabella closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his hands against her skin, inhaling the scent that had become so familiar and precious to her. Every rational part of her mind screamed that she should lie, that she should protect them both by denying what they both knew to be true. Yes, she whispered, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. God help me, yes. I love you. Alexander's breath escaped in a shuddering sigh, and then his lips were on hers, soft and desperate and full of months of suppressed longing. Isabella melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with all the passion she had tried so hard to deny. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Alexander rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. This is madness, he whispered. Complete madness, Isabella agreed, but she made no move to step away from him. If we pursue this, there will be consequences. The court will be scandalized. The nobles will question my fitness to rule. Lord Harrison will do everything in his power to destroy you. Isabella pulled back to look at him. And if we don't pursue it? If you marry me off to Sir Marcus and take another political bride, can you live with that? Alexander's laugh was bitter. Live with it? Isabella, I've been barely surviving these past 3 years. You've shown me what it means to truly live again. I don't think I can go back to merely existing. Then what do we do? Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his hands moving to frame her face again. I don't know. I only know that I cannot give you to another man, and I cannot marry another woman while you live and breathe and exist in this world. The nobles will never accept me as queen. I'm the daughter of a traitor. You're the daughter of a man who stood up for what he believed was right, even when it cost him everything. Alexander's voice was fierce. And you are the woman I love. If that's not enough for them, then perhaps I need new nobles. Isabella felt her heart soar and plummet simultaneously. Alexander, what you're suggesting, it could tear the kingdom apart. Then we'll find another way. Alexander kissed her again, softer this time, full of promise and determination. I don't know how, but we'll find a way. I refuse to believe that love is always the enemy of duty. A sharp knock on the study door made them both freeze. Lord Harrison's voice came through the thick wood, cold and suspicious. Your Majesty, Sir Marcus is waiting in the great hall for your answer. The morning grows late. Alexander closed his eyes, his jaw clenching. Tell Sir Marcus that his petition has been denied, he called back. Lady Isabella will not be available for marriage. The silence from the other side of the door was deafening. When Harrison finally spoke, his voice carried a dangerous edge. Your Majesty, perhaps we should discuss this matter privately before— The matter is closed, Lord Chancellor. You may inform Sir Marcus that while I appreciate his interest, Lady Isabella's situation has changed. Alexander looked at Isabella, and she saw her own mixture of terror and exhilaration reflected in his eyes. Whatever happened next, there would be no going back. They had crossed a line that would change everything. The news of Sir Marcus's rejected proposal spread through the court like wildfire, and by evening the speculation had reached fever pitch. Isabella found herself confined to her chambers for her own protection, according to the guards who now stood outside her door. But she suspected the protection was as much for the court's benefit as her own. Lady Catherine arrived as the sun was setting, her expression grim. "You foolish girl," she said without preamble, settling into the chair by Isabella's fireplace. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Isabella looked up from her embroidery, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. "I'm afraid I don't know what you mean, Lady Catherine. Don't play innocent with me. The entire court knows that the king refused Sir Marcus's proposal, a proposal that would have been perfectly reasonable, politically advantageous, and would have resolved the uncomfortable situation of your presence here." Catherine's eyes were sharp with worry. "Instead, he's created a scandal that has Lord Harrison calling emergency meetings with the council." Isabella set down her needlework. "What kind of meetings?" "The kind where ambitious men discuss whether a king who refuses reasonable counsel is fit to rule." Catherine leaned forward, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Isabella, there are whispers of madness, of the king being unfit for the crown. Some are even suggesting that his grief over Queen Margaret has finally broken his mind." Isabella felt cold fear creep up her spine. "They cannot seriously be considering. They are considering everything," Catherine interrupted. "Lord Harrison has always resented the fact that he serves rather than rules. If he can convince enough nobles that the king is mentally unstable, emotionally compromised—" "A regency," Isabella breathed, understanding the implications immediately. "Exactly. With Harrison as regent until such time as the king recovers his faculties, which, of course, he never would." Catherine stood and began pacing. "And you, my dear girl, would be the first casualty of such a change in power." Isabella rose as well, her mind racing. "I have to warn him." "Warn him of what?" "That his own actions have consequences. The king is not a fool, Isabella. He knows exactly what he's risking." Catherine stopped pacing and fixed Isabella with a stern stare. "The question is, are you worth it?" Before Isabella could answer, they were interrupted by a commotion in the corridor outside. Male voices, urgent and angry, grew closer. Isabella recognized Lord Harrison's cold tones, but there were others. Sir William Mortimer, Lord Edmund Ashworth, several other powerful nobles. "Completely unacceptable behavior for a king. Emotionally compromised since the Queen's death. Kingdom cannot afford such instability." Catherine grabbed Isabella's arm. "They're coming here," she whispered urgently. "Whatever happens, say nothing that could be used against the king. Do you understand me?" Isabella nodded, her heart pounding as the voices stopped directly outside her door. She heard the guards stepping aside, then the sound of multiple locks being turned. Lord Harrison entered first, followed by 5 other members of the King's Council. Their expressions ranged from disapproval to outright hostility. Isabella stood tall, drawing on every lesson in dignity her father had ever taught her. "Gentlemen," she said with a perfect curtsy, "to what do I owe this honor?" Harrison's smile was razor-thin. "Lady Isabella, or should I say the woman who has bewitched our king into making decisions that threaten the very stability of the realm." "I'm afraid I don't understand your meaning, Lord Harrison." "Don't you?" Sir William Mortimer stepped forward, his florid face red with anger. "The king rejects a perfectly reasonable marriage proposal that would have resolved your situation honorably. He sends away a French delegation offering a marriage alliance that could have secured England's future for generations. All for what? For a traitor's daughter who has somehow convinced him she's worth more than the good of the kingdom?" Isabella felt her temper flare, but Catherine's warning held her tongue in check. "The king's decisions are his own to make, Sir William. I have no influence over royal policy." "No influence?" Lord Harrison laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "My dear girl, you have more influence than you realize. The question is, how far are you willing to push that influence?" "I don't—" "Let me be very clear," Harrison interrupted, moving closer. "His Majesty's behavior has become erratic. Emotional decisions that put personal desire above political necessity. The council is concerned." Isabella felt the threat beneath his words. "Concerned about what exactly?" "About a king who appears to value the whims of a prisoner over the counsel of his advisers. About a ruler who makes decisions with his heart rather than his head." Harrison's pale eyes glittered with malice. "There are precedents, you know, for dealing with monarchs who become unfit for their duties." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Isabella understood now. This wasn't just about her relationship with Alexander. This was about power, about Harrison and his allies seeing an opportunity to seize control. "What do you want from me?" Isabella asked quietly. "We want you to leave." Lord Ashworth spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of his years. "Tonight, quietly. We've arranged for you to be escorted to a convent in the northern counties. You'll be comfortable there, well cared for, and far enough away that your presence will no longer be a distraction for His Majesty." Isabella felt the walls closing in around her. "And if I refuse?" Harrison's smile turned predatory. "Then we'll be forced to take other measures to protect the kingdom from an unfit king and his corrupting influence." The threat was clear. Agree to disappear or watch Alexander lose his throne. Isabella realized with crystal clarity that this had always been Harrison's plan. He had simply been waiting for the right opportunity to move against a king who had never trusted him completely. "You're threatening the king," Isabella said, her voice steady despite her fear. "We're protecting the kingdom," Harrison corrected. "His Majesty will recover from his infatuation much more quickly once the source of temptation is removed. And you, my dear, will have the satisfaction of knowing you saved the man you claim to love from his own worst impulses." Isabella looked around the room at the faces of the conspirators, men who had sworn fealty to Alexander, but were now plotting against him, men who saw her as nothing more than a pawn in their larger game for power. "I need time to consider your generous offer," she said finally. Harrison shook his head. "Time is a luxury we cannot afford. The carriage leaves at midnight. You have until then to prepare yourself." As the nobles filed out, Lord Harrison paused at the door. "Choose wisely, Lady Isabella. The fate of the kingdom and the king you claim to love hangs in the balance." When they were gone, Isabella sank into her chair, her mind reeling. She had 3 hours to decide. Sacrifice her own happiness to protect Alexander's throne, or fight for their love and risk destroying everything he had worked to build. Either way, she was about to lose the man she loved. Isabella sat in her chamber as the hours ticked toward midnight, her packed belongings waiting by the door like silent accusations. She had made her decision, or rather, she had realized there was only one choice she could live with. She would go to the convent, disappear from Alexander's life, and hope that her sacrifice would be enough to protect his throne. But as the castle bells chimed 11 o'clock, her door burst open without ceremony. Alexander strode in, his face a mask of barely controlled fury, still wearing his formal court attire, but with his doublet unlaced and his hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet as he took in her traveling dress and packed bags. Isabella rose from her chair, her heart breaking at the sight of him. "Alexander, you shouldn't be here. If Harrison's men see you, Harrison's men are currently indisposed," Alexander said grimly. "Along with Harrison himself. It's amazing how quickly conspirators scatter when their leader is arrested for treason." Isabella's eyes widened. "You arrested Lord Harrison?" "Among others. Sir William Mortimer, Lord Ashworth, 3 other council members who thought they could threaten my queen and plot against my crown." Alexander moved closer, his grey eyes blazing with an intensity she had never seen before. "Did you really think I would let them force you away? Did you believe I was so weak that I would sacrifice the woman I love to appease a handful of ambitious fools?" "Your queen," Isabella whispered, focusing on the most shocking part of his declaration. Alexander reached into his doublet and withdrew a small velvet box. "I've spent the evening in my private chapel with Archbishop Thomas, discussing the theological and legal precedents for royal marriages to unconventional brides. It seems there's more flexibility in the matter than Harrison would have had me believe." Isabella stared at the box in his hands, her mind reeling. "Alexander, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've been a fool. I've been thinking like a king when I should have been thinking like a man who knows what he wants." Alexander dropped to one knee, opening the box to reveal a ring of breathtaking beauty, a large emerald surrounded by diamonds, obviously crafted for royalty. "I'm saying that I love you, Isabella Whitmore, and I'm asking you to be my wife." Isabella felt tears streaming down her face. "You can't. The nobles will never accept." "The nobles who matter will accept what I tell them to accept. The ones who don't matter are currently enjoying the hospitality of the Tower." Alexander's voice was steady, determined. "I'm done living my life according to other people's expectations, Isabella. I've been a dutiful king, a political king, a king who put the crown before everything else. And what did it get me? 3 years of misery, a court full of vipers, and the near loss of the only woman I've ever truly loved. Isabella sank to her knees in front of him, reaching out to touch his face with trembling fingers. The kingdom needs stability. Marriage to me would only bring more chaos. The kingdom needs a king who knows his own mind and follows his own heart, a king who chooses love and loyalty over political convenience. Alexander caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek. My people respect strength, Isabella. They've seen me weak with grief, manipulated by ambitious counselors. Let them see me strong in love instead. And if there are more conspiracies, more attempts to undermine your rule? Alexander's smile was fierce. Then we'll face them together, as king and queen, as husband and wife, as partners in all things. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. I would rather fight the whole world with you beside me than rule peacefully without you. Isabella felt the last of her resistance crumble. You're completely mad. Completely, Alexander agreed. Will you marry me anyway? Isabella looked into his eyes, those grey depths that had haunted her dreams, that had seen too much pain and were now bright with hope and determination. She thought of all the reasons this was impossible, all the obstacles they would face, all the enemies who would try to tear them apart. Then she thought of the alternative, a life without him, watching from afar as he married another, knowing that they had let fear win. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Alexander's breath escaped in a rush of relief and joy. He slipped the emerald ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as if it had been made for her, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that spoke of months of suppressed longing and the promise of a lifetime together. When they finally broke apart, Isabella noticed something else different about him. Alexander, where's your crown? Alexander laughed, a sound of pure happiness she had never heard from him before. Locked away in the royal treasury, where it belongs when I'm not performing kingly duties. Tonight I'm just a man who's asked the woman he loves to marry him. Tomorrow, he stood and helped her to her feet, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Tomorrow I'll be a king announcing his engagement to his chosen queen. The court will be in chaos. Let them be in chaos. Sometimes chaos is necessary to clear away the old and make room for the new. Alexander gathered her into his arms again, holding her close. Besides, I have excellent advisors to help me navigate the political waters, starting with my future queen, who happens to be one of the most intelligent women I've ever known. Isabella laughed through her tears. Is that a royal command? It's a husband's request to his wife, Alexander corrected, his voice soft with wonder at the words. We're partners now, Isabella, in everything. As if summoned by his words, a soft knock came at the door. Your Majesty, came Mary's voice. Archbishop Thomas is waiting in the chapel as you requested. Isabella looked at Alexander in surprise. Tonight? I've waited long enough to make you mine, Alexander said, his eyes burning with love and desire. I don't intend to wait another day. Unless you object. Isabella thought of the conventional royal wedding that would normally be expected. Months of planning, political negotiations, elaborate ceremonies designed more for show than for love. Then she looked at the man before her, at the ring on her finger, at the future stretching before them. I can think of nothing I want more than to be your wife tonight, she said softly. Alexander's smile could have lit the entire castle. Then let's go claim our happiness, my love. Let's show the world that sometimes love really does conquer all. 6 months later, Queen Isabella stood on the balcony of the royal apartments, watching the spring sunrise paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. The emerald ring on her finger caught the light, but it was now accompanied by a simple gold band that meant even more to her, the symbol of vows spoken in a candlelit chapel with only Archbishop Thomas, Mary, and Sir Marcus as witnesses. The early months of their marriage had been turbulent, as Alexander had predicted. Several noble houses had initially refused to acknowledge Isabella as queen, citing her father's treason and the irregular nature of their wedding. But Alexander had handled each challenge with a combination of political acumen and unwavering determination that had reminded everyone why he was king. Lord Harrison and his co-conspirators had been tried for treason. Harrison himself had been executed, while the others had been stripped of their titles and exiled. Alexander had appointed new advisors, younger men and women who valued competence over political scheming, including several who had supported Isabella's legitimacy from the beginning. You're up early, my queen, Alexander's voice came from behind her, warm with sleep and affection. Isabella turned to find her husband approaching, his dark hair tousled and wearing only a loose white shirt and breeches. Even after 6 months of marriage, the sight of him still made her heart race. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, moving into his arms as naturally as breathing. "I was thinking about everything that's changed." Alexander wrapped his arms around her, resting his chin on top of her head. "Good changes or troubling ones?" "Good ones, mostly. The northern counties are reporting their best harvest in years, since you reduced the tax burden. The new trade agreements with Scotland are bringing prosperity to the border regions. The people seem hopeful again." Alexander murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. "And what about you, my love? Are you hopeful?" Isabella leaned back against his chest, watching a hawk circle in the distance. "I'm more than hopeful. I'm grateful. 6 months ago I thought my life was over. Now you're Queen of England, married to a man who adores you, and carrying the future heir to the throne." Alexander finished softly, his hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. Isabella smiled, covering his hand with hers. The pregnancy was still early, known only to them and the royal physician, but it filled her with a joy she hadn't known was possible. "Do you think our child will have your stubborn streak or mine?" "Undoubtedly both," Alexander laughed. "God help the kingdom." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the castle come to life below them. Servants hurried across the courtyards, guards changed shifts, and early-rising courtiers began their daily routines. It was a peaceful scene, but Isabella knew the tranquility was hard-won. "Alexander," she said finally, "do you ever regret it? Choosing me over political convenience?" Alexander turned her in his arms so he could see her face. "Never. Not for a single moment." His grey eyes were serious, intense. "Isabella, before you came into my life, I was existing, not living. I was a king without a heart, a man without joy. You gave me back everything I thought I'd lost forever. Even when the French renewed their marriage offer last month, Princess Marguerite would have brought a considerable dowry." Alexander's laugh was genuine. "My darling wife, no amount of French gold could compare to what I have with you. Besides," he added with a wicked grin, "I rather suspect Princess Marguerite would find me terribly boring. She's 18 and romantic. I'm 33 and completely besotted with my wife." Isabella felt tears prick her eyes, happy tears this time. "I love you," she said simply, "and I love you. More than crown, more than kingdom, more than life itself." Alexander cupped her face gently. "You took my punishment and turned it into my salvation." A discreet cough from the doorway interrupted them. Sir Marcus stood there, now captain of the Queen's Guard, wearing the colours of his new position with obvious pride. "Your Majesties," he said with a bow that held no trace of bitterness despite his rejected proposal, "the morning council awaits your pleasure." Alexander sighed. "Duty calls, I'm afraid." He kissed Isabella softly. "Will you join us? The council has grown quite fond of your insights on matters of trade and taxation." Isabella smiled. "Of course, someone has to keep you from being too generous with the royal treasury." As they prepared to face another day of ruling England together, Isabella reflected on the impossible journey that had brought them here. She had come to court as a prisoner, a symbol of royal justice. She had found love, faced down conspirators, and emerged as a queen who was respected not just for her title, but for her intelligence and compassion. The story that had begun with punishment had become a tale of redemption, proving that sometimes the most unlikely love affairs were the ones that changed the world. "Ready, my queen?" Alexander asked, offering her his arm. Isabella took it, feeling the weight of the simple crown that had replaced her prisoner's chains. "Ready, my king." Together, they walked toward the council chamber, toward their duties as rulers, toward a future bright with possibility. Behind them, the morning sun filled their private chambers with golden light, illuminating the space where a king and queen had learned that the greatest strength came not from wielding power alone, but from sharing it with someone you loved. The punishment had become a gift, the prisoner had become a queen, and the king, who had thought himself incapable of love, had discovered that it was, indeed, the most powerful force in any kingdom. Their story would be told for generations, not as a tale of political maneuvering or royal duty, but as proof that sometimes, when two hearts refuse to surrender to circumstance, love truly can conquer all.